These 15 reggae celebrities are hiding the real truth about Hurricane Melissa relief. I uncovered the secret mission one star is running that no news outlet will report. Stay until the final name to discover who is actually rebuilding Jamaica from the ground up and why they don't want you to know. Long before official rescue routes reopened, Shaggy was already moving through the broken corridors of Black River, navigating fallen power lines, splintered rooftops, and the raw smell of floodwater that clung to everything it touched. It carried no entourage, no spectacle, only resolve. Families recognized him even before he spoke. Yet the familiar grin they knew from stages was replaced by something heavier. He walked from home to home with small convoys, delivering food, water, and whatever supplies he could gather. Children clung to their mothers as they stepped forward to receive the relief, almost unable to believe that someone they had only seen on screens now stood before them, offering comfort with his own hands. The devastation unsettled him deeply. Every collapsed structure, every shattered window pane, every mother wiping her eyes reminded him that fame meant nothing without service. He moved quietly, yet his presence held the weight of a man carrying an entire community on his shoulders. Far from Black River, on a different stretch of the island, where the debris still smelled of salt and grief, Beanie Man was already working with a fierceness that matched the urgency of the disaster. He arrived not as a king of dancehall, but as a brother who refused to leave his people struggling in the ruins. Alongside his wife, Camille, he walked through homes where the floors were still wet from the storm surge. He helped lift pieces of broken roofing, assisted elders who could barely stand, and distributed essentials to families still too shocked to speak. His voice, usually charged with electricity on stage, now carried a tenderness that came only from responsibility. He could not rebuild the entire island by himself, but he could hold broken spirits long enough for them to remember that hope had not abandoned them. Hope had many forms in those days, and one of them emerged in the unlikeliest places inside the disciplined mind of a DJ Palmer. The world knew him as Vibes Cartel, a man forged in the fires of dancehall controversy and resilience. Yet now his energy shifted into something quietly profound. Through the Adidja Palmer Foundation, he channeled resources toward rebuilding youth, shelters, and community spaces battered by the hurricane. It was as though freedom had awakened in him a renewed sense of responsibility. He coordinated efforts that stretched across districts, providing support not just in momentary bursts, but in structured, sustainable waves. The revelation that DJ Khaled had contributed funds for the children of Jamaica illuminated a softening inside the heart of a man many had misunderstood for years. Even those who once doubted him found themselves seeing something different, something deeply human within the fire of his legacy. But even that, humanity paled in comparison to the towering compassion that rose from another icon whose return had already felt like a miracle, Buju Banton. When the world learned that the Buju Banton Foundation had partnered with aviation legend Barrington Irving, the news struck the island like a spark of divine intervention. A massive Boeing 737 soared across the sky, loaded with more than 50,000 pounds of food, medicine, clothing, generator supplies that could breathe life back into communities suffocating under the weight of loss. As the aircraft touched down, many survivors looked upward through teary eyes, convinced that grace had taken the form of a plane. Buju stood among volunteers who worked tirelessly to unload the cargo, his presence radiating a quiet, grounding strength. For him, this mission was not charity. It was duty. It was justice. It was love made tangible, delivered through steel wings and open hands. Alongside that monumental gesture, another form of mercy moved through the island. The kind that did not rely on engines or aircraft, but on the gentle persistence of a man whose voice had long been a spiritual lighthouse for his people. Luciano walked through the ruined streets with a solemn grace that made survivors stop in their tracks. They recognized the messenger not by the songs he carried, but by the compassion etched across his face. As he moved from one household to the next, he offered prayers, encouragement, and presence. He reminded people that storms may break walls, but could never break the covenant of love that bound Jamaica together. His words were soft yet powerful, and they wrapped around the wounded like a warm shawl on a cold night. Some said his footsteps felt like hymns. Others swore his voice carried a calm that even the strongest winds could not erase. While Luciano provided spiritual balm, another global force worked with strategic urgency behind the scenes. Sean Paul was never the kind of man to wait for perfect conditions or bureaucratic direction. Instead, he partnered with Food for the Poor Jamaica and pledged to personally match donations up to $50,000 US. His message to the world was clear. This was not the moment for celebration, but for collective action. As relief programs gathered momentum, he joined Shaggy in the early planning stages of a charity initiative intended to inject long-term support into schools and homes ravaged by the storm. Sean Paul understood that recovery was not measured by the immediate distribution of supplies, but by the rebuilding of dignity, opportunity, and stability. That desire for stability echoed in communities where the storm had taken the most from those who had the least. In August Town, the familiar gates of Judgment Yard swung open not for musical gatherings, but for survival itself. Sizzla transformed the space into an emergency center where families found food, warmth, and guidance. The air smelled of cooking fires and wet earth, and the sound of children's voices blended with the clatter of volunteers organizing supplies. Sizzla moved among them with calm intensity, blessing each effort and reminding everyone that righteousness grew strongest in seasons of hardship. His presence anchored the entire space like a pillar of light. Fire of a different kind ignited in the heart of Capleton, who moved across communities with the steadiness of a man who had already survived countless storms, literal and metaphorical. His cleanup crews worked through mud, rubble, and fallen trees, lifting burdens from families who had no strength left to lift anything for themselves. He carried not just supplies, but declarations of revival. Jamaica would rise again, he said, not because destruction had spared it, but because destruction had awakened its truest power. Meanwhile, across the ocean where Jamaica lived inside the hearts of its diaspora, Maxi Priest was orchestrating movements of compassion that stretched from London's bustling streets to the worn edges of Kingston. He organized drives that collected blankets, food, and clothing. He collaborated with Luciano at community events that drew crowds eager to contribute even the smallest items, knowing that in tragedy, small offerings carried enormous meanings. Maxi Priest believed that reggae was born from struggle but matured through love, an idea that resonated deeply during those weeks of recovery. His actions stitched the diaspora to the homeland in a tapestry of shared responsibility. Another voice from the diaspora rose through the efforts of White Yardie, whose comedic presence had long connected him to Jamaican culture in ways that transcended birthplace. His platform became an amplifier for the island's suffering, transforming humor into humanity. He rallied supporters to donate funds and supplies, reminding them that love for Jamaica was measured not by accent or heritage, but by willingness to stand with the country when it needed its people most. Back home, inside churches that had taken on the role of makeshift sanctuaries, Marion Hall, known once as Lady Saw, but now reborn in ministry, opened her doors wide. Mothers carrying infants arrived with nothing but the clothes they wore when the storm broke. Elders limped through the doorway seeking shelter. Young men and women, still dazed by the violence of the hurricane, found themselves kneeling in prayer beside strangers. Marion Hall moved between them with practiced compassion, offering words that soothed and strengthened. Her church became a place where grief could rest and where hunger met nourishment, both physical and spiritual. She had traded stages for altars long ago, and now that altar became a lifeline for hundreds. At the same time, a different kind of energy moved through the younger generation. Masca found himself compelled into an unexpected leadership role, one that extended well beyond the boundaries of music. Through his foundation, he mobilized waves of youth volunteers who waded through debris-filled streets, carrying supplies on their backs and determination in their eyes. He reminded them that the future belonged to those willing to protect it, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. In his hands, music became mission, and mission became a blueprint for resilience. While youth rebuilt the streets, the spiritual guardians of reggae's bloodline stepped forward with the calm authority of legacy. Damian Marley, Stephen Marley, and Julian Marley each moved toward recovery with distinct but unified purpose. One focused on the reconstruction of schools, understanding that education was the backbone of any society hoping to rise after catastrophe. Another ensured that medical aid reached the areas where the wounded suffered in silence. The third sponsored families who had lost homes, offering resources that lifted them from despair into the beginnings of stability. Their combined actions formed a quiet symphony of service, an echo of the principles their father had given the world. Alongside these pillars of reggae's royal lineage, women whose voices had long preserved the softer, soulful side of the culture stepped into the aftermath with fierce compassion. Itana reached out toward shelters, housing women and children who had been left adrift by the storm. Her donations became lifelines for mothers who had lost everything, reminding them that their struggles did not go unseen. In the digital world, Tifa turned her influence into action, hosting fundraisers that reached audiences far beyond Jamaica's shores. Fans from California to Toronto, from the United Kingdom to Brazil, responded with generosity that transformed screens into channels of salvation. The combined force of these efforts began to reshape the island in ways no government agency could replicate. Roads cleared faster, shelters filled, food distribution stabilized. Children resumed classes in temporary spaces, strengthened by community love. The storm had ripped through Jamaica like a thief in the night, but the people, guided by the island's most beloved voices, responded like warriors of light. What united them was not music, genre, rivalry, or fame. It was the unbreakable understanding that Jamaica lived inside them as deeply as they lived inside Jamaica. Now you see who truly stepped up. Which effort do you think made the biggest unseen impact? Tell me who else should be on this list in the comments below. Follow for more real stories the headlines will never show you.